What they had not planned for was something they did not know existed. Kira's squad reached their defensive position in the ruins of what had been New Lagos's commercial district 3 hours into the invasion. The city was burning. The sky thick with smoke and the trails of missiles. Hegemony dropships had deployed shock troopers throughout the urban area. Their strategy clear. Take the city block by block, minimize their own casualties, and break human morale through relentless methodical conquest. Position here, Kira ordered her squad of 12 taking cover behind the collapsed remains of an office building. Their weapons were standard issue, their armor reliable, but nothing special. They were regular soldiers, trained and competent, but they faced an enemy with technology 50 years more advanced. The first Hegemony shock troopers appeared at the end of the street. Their plasma weapons glowing with deadly energy. They moved in perfect formation. Their armor reflecting the fire light. Their movements coordinated through neural links that made them operate like a single organism. Kira's squad opened fire. Their bullets found targets, but the Hegemony armor was too strong. A few troopers fell, but more kept coming. The return fire was devastating. Plasma bolts burned through concrete like paper, and within minutes, Kira had lost 3 soldiers. Fall back to secondary position, she ordered, her mind racing through tactical options. They were outgunned, outmatched, and running out of time. The Hegemony troopers advanced steadily, their plasma weapons providing superior range and stopping power. Kira's squad retreated through the rubble, but the Hegemony forces were everywhere. Every street, every alley, every route of escape was cut off. She found herself pinned in what had been a shopping center. Her remaining 9 soldiers scattered among the ruins. The enemy closing in from 3 sides. She activated her command channel. Delta 7 to command, requesting immediate evacuation. Position is compromised. Enemy has superior numbers and firepower. The response came back within seconds, but it was not what she expected. The voice was her commanding officer, but there was something strange in his tone, something that sounded almost like fear. Evac denied. Delta 7. Harlequin protocol initiated. Keep your head down and do not, I repeat, do not engage any friendlies you cannot positively identify. Sir, what is Harlequin? The question died in her throat as the temperature dropped. It happened in seconds. The oppressive heat of the burning city replaced by cold that made her breath fog inside her helmet. Kira's suit sensors went haywire, showing temperature readings that made no sense. Atmospheric pressure that should not be possible in open air. Through her scope, she watched the Hegemony troopers advancing on her position. They were 20 m away, 15-10. They would overrun her position in seconds. Kira prepared to make her last stand, her finger tightening on the trigger. Then the Hegemony soldiers stopped. They stopped advancing and started firing wildly at nothing. Their plasma weapons lit up the smoke-filled air, but they were not shooting at Kira's position. They were shooting at shadows, at empty air, at things that were not there. Except things were there. Kira saw it through her scope. Impossible but undeniable. The Hegemony troopers were dying. One after another, they fell. Their weapons clattering to the ground, their bodies collapsing in ways that suggested violence, but showed no visible wounds. No muzzle flashes lit the darkness. No sound of gunfire echoed through the ruins, just the wet sound of something sharp meeting flesh and the terrible efficiency of predators at work. The temperature continued to drop. Kira's hands were shaking now, though whether from cold or fear, she could not tell. She watched as 37 HFY shock troopers died in less than 2 minutes, killed by an enemy she could not see, could not hear, and could barely comprehend. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the temperature normalized. The cold vanished, replaced by the heat of burning buildings. The impossible pressure readings on her suit returned to normal. The HFY troopers lay dead in the street, their advanced armor unable to protect them from whatever had killed them. Kira stood slowly, her weapon raised, but her hands trembling. Her squad remained in cover, all of them, having witnessed the same impossible event. The street was silent except for the distant sounds of battle elsewhere. In the city, movement caught her eye. A figure emerged from the smoke, walking casually through the carnage as if strolling through a park. The figure wore combat gear, but it matched no standard issue Kira had ever seen. The armor was matte black, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The helmet showed no rank, no unit designation, no identifying features of any kind. The figure stopped beside one of the dead HFY troopers, examined the body briefly, then looked up at Kira's position. Even though she could not see the person's face behind the featureless helmet, Kira felt the weight of that gaze. "Position secure, Lieutenant," the figure said. The voice was modulated, processed through technology that made it impossible to determine gender, age, or even species. It could have been human. It could have been anything. "Who are you?" Kira asked, her voice steady despite her fear. The figure tilted its head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost amused. "That is not a question you want answered, Lieutenant. What you want to know is how to report this engagement." Kira looked at the dead HFY soldiers, at the lack of bullet casings, at the absence of any evidence that her squad had been responsible for this slaughter. "How am I supposed to explain this?" Official report. Enemy casualties attributed to your squad's defensive action. Enemy forces encountered unexpected resistance and withdrew after sustaining heavy losses. No friendly casualties. Do you understand? Kira understood. She understood that she was being asked to lie, to take credit for kills she had not made, to pretend that her squad of regular soldiers had defeated 37 elite shock troopers without losing a single person. She also understood that she had no choice. "Understood," she said quietly. The figure nodded once. "Good. Continue your mission, Lieutenant. Earth needs soldiers like you on the front lines." The figure paused, then added, "But Earth needs soldiers like us in the shadows. Remember that." Before Kira could respond, the figure turned and walked back into the smoke. She watched it go, tracking the movement until the figure simply vanished. There one moment and gone the next, as if it had never existed at all. Kira's second in command, Sergeant Marcus Torres, approached cautiously. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. "Lieutenant, what the hell was that?" Kira looked at her sergeant, at her squad, at the dead HFY soldiers. She thought about the official report she would have to file, the lies she would have to tell, the credit she would have to take for something she had not done. "That," she said slowly, "was not here. None of this happened the way we saw it. We engaged the enemy, we won, and we continue the mission. Clear?" Torres hesitated, then nodded. The rest of the squad nodded as well. They all understood the message. Some things were not meant to be discussed. Some truths were more dangerous than lies, and some victories were better left unexplained. The battle for new Legos continued for 3 more days. Kira's squad fought bravely, held their positions, and contributed to the eventual human victory. But she never Forgot that moment in the ruins when something impossible had saved her life. And she was not alone. Across the city, across the continent, across the entire planet, similar reports began to filter through military channels. Enemy forces destroyed by unknown attackers. Hegemony positions overrun with no explanation. Shock troopers found dead, with no visible wounds. No evidence of human presence. No indication of how they had died. The official reports all said the same thing. Human forces had achieved decisive victories through superior tactics and determination. The truth whispered in barracks and mess, but never officially acknowledged, was different. Something was out there. Something that wore no uniform. Answered to no public command and killed with terrifying efficiency. Something that existed in the space between official record and reality, operating in shadows that conventional warfare could not reach. The hegemony had studied human conventional forces. They had prepared for human stubbornness, human refusal to surrender, human tendency to fight harder when wounded. They had built their invasion plan around defeating those characteristics. But they had not prepared for the vanishing units. They had not prepared for soldiers who did not exist in any database, who struck from nowhere and disappeared without trace, who operated under protocols that even most humans had never heard of. The hegemony had calculated the cost of defeating Earth's official military. They had never calculated the cost of fighting Earth's ghosts. 3 days after the invasion began, forces started reporting strange occurrences. Patrol units found dead with no enemies in sight. Communication relays destroyed by invisible attackers. Command posts going silent. Then discovered as scenes of carnage that made no tactical sense. The hegemony commanders tried to adapt, tried to counter an enemy they could not see or predict. They increased patrols, improved security, deployed their best sensors and detection equipment. It made no difference. The vanishing units struck when and where they chose. They appeared like nightmares, killed with precision that suggested intimate knowledge of hegemony tactics and technology, then vanished before anyone could respond. They left no evidence, no traces, no clues to their methods or identities. And slowly, inexorably, the hegemony invasion began to falter, not because they were losing conventional battles. Those they often won, but because their soldiers were terrified. Because every shadow might hide death. Because the enemy they could see was dangerous enough, but the enemy they could not see was breaking their will to fight. Kira Akoya never saw the shadowy figure again. But she saw the effects of their work. She saw hegemony soldiers who flinched at shadows, who fired at nothing, who abandoned positions not because they were defeated, but because they were afraid. She saw an invasion force that had come to conquer Earth. Encountering something they had not known existed and could not hope to defeat. She saw the vanishing units winning a war that conventional forces alone might have lost. And she understood finally what that modulated voice had meant. Earth needed soldiers on the front lines fighting the visible war with courage and determination. But Earth also needed soldiers in the shadows, fighting a different war entirely, one that existed in fear and uncertainty and the terrible power of the unknown. The hegemony had learned to fear Earth's army. Now they were learning about something far worse. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the orbital station. Above the neutral world of Terrace Prime, representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber. A space designed to accommodate the galaxy's diverse civilizations. Aquatic species floated in specialized tanks. Silicon-based life forms rested on heated platforms. And dozens of other creatures filled the seats in a display of the Council's reach across known space. But today, all attention focused on one species, the humans. Ambassador Chen. We walked into the chamber with measured steps, his diplomatic training evident in every gesture. He was a man in his 50s, his hair graying at the temples, his face carrying the lines of someone who had spent decades navigating the complex politics of galactic relations. He wore a simple suit, dark blue with Earth's emblem on the collar, and carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who knew he was walking into a trap. Delegate Mordith of the Cerulean Concord rose from his seat as Chen approached the speaking platform. The Cerulean was massive, easily 3 m tall, his reptilian features and glowing amber eyes giving him an intimidating presence. His voice, when translated, carried weight and authority. Ambassador Chen, the Council recognizes your presence. We have grave matters to discuss regarding recent military actions by human forces. Chen bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that cost him nothing, but bought him a few seconds to assess the room. He could see anger in some faces, fear in others, and calculation in many. This session had been called quickly without the usual diplomatic preparation. Something had forced the Council's hand. I am at the Council's service, Chen replied, his voice calm. Though I must note that the United Earth Defense Force has operated in full accordance with galactic warfare conventions during our defensive operations against the hegemony invasion. Morditha's eyes narrowed. The hegemony invasion. Yes, let us discuss that. The hegemony committed significant forces to what they termed a containment action against human expansion. Their military analysis suggested a campaign lasting no more than 1 standard week. Instead, they sued for peace within 6 weeks. Their forces broken, their military command in disarray. Can you explain this unexpected outcome? Chen allowed himself a small smile. The hegemony underestimated human resolve. It is not the first time an aggressor has made that mistake, and I suspect it will not be the last. Resolve, Morteth repeated, his translator making the word sound like an accusation. Is that what you call it? Because the hegemony calls it something else. They call it terror. They call it warfare that violates every principle of honorable combat. They call it attacks by forces that should not exist. The chamber fell silent. Chen felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon him. Species from across the galaxy, waiting to see how he would respond. He had known this moment would come eventually. The vanishing units had been too effective, their actions too widespread, their impact too significant to remain unquestioned forever. I am afraid I do not understand your implication, Delegate, Chen said carefully. Human forces engaged in defensive operations using standard military tactics. If the hegemony found our defense unexpectedly effective, that speaks to their faulty intelligence, not to any unusual tactics on our part. Commander Jothik of the Vin Dominion stood, his 4 eyes fixing on Chen with unsettling intensity. Then explain. Ambassador, how 17 hegemony installations were neutralized. I am simultaneously across 4 light years of space. Your nearest registered fleet was 3 systems away. Your official military communications show no deployments in that region. And yet 17 installations heavily defended with thousands of troops were destroyed in the same hour. Chen kept his expression neutral. I am afraid you are operating under false information, Commander. We had no forces in that region during the time frame you describe. Precisely, Jik said, his mandibles clicking in agitation. You had no registered forces, no official deployments, no acknowledged military presence, and yet the installations were destroyed by someone. The hegemony survivors report attackers who appeared from nowhere, killed with precision and efficiency beyond even your conventional forces' capabilities. Then vanished without trace. They report soldiers who wore no identifying marks, used technology that matches no known human equipment, and operated under protocols that even captured human prisoners had never heard of. The chamber erupted in murmurs, species whispering among themselves in dozens of languages. Chen could feel the moment slipping away from diplomatic control. They knew not everything perhaps, but enough to ask the right questions. "Commander," Chen said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the murmurs. "Are you telling this council that the mighty Vin Dominion is afraid of ghost stories? Every military has legends, tales told to frighten enemies and inspire troops. The hegemony suffered a humiliating defeat, and rather than accept responsibility for their failure, they create stories of invisible attackers. It is a tale as old as warfare itself." Mortis slammed his fist on his podium, the sound echoing through the chamber. "This is not a ghost story, Ambassador. We have evidence. We have testimony from hundreds of hegemony soldiers. We have surveillance footage showing static and interference at the exact moments of attack. We have bodies, Ambassador. Thousands of bodies. Killed by methods that leave no conventional traces." Chen felt a bead of sweat form on his brow, but did not wipe it away. Any nervous gesture would be noticed, analyzed, used against him. "I cannot speak to hegemony failures in their own security protocols. If their installations were vulnerable to sabotage or internal conflicts, that is their concern, not humanity's." A new voice entered the discussion. Delegate Thilvera of the Kelsharon Collective. A species known for their analytical minds and neutral stance on most conflicts, activated her translation device. "Ambassador Chen, we have conducted independent analysis of the incidents in question. The statistical probability of human forces being absent from 17 simultaneous attacks on hegemony positions. Yet those positions being destroyed by methods consistent with human special operations tactics is so infinitesimally small as to be impossible. Unless of course there are human forces that are not part of your official military structure." Chen noticed something then, a detail he had been trained to watch for in diplomatic negotiations. His hand had moved unconsciously to his collar, adjusting it slightly. It was an old tell, a habit from his younger days when lying had made him physically uncomfortable. He had thought he had conquered that weakness decades ago. But the stress of this confrontation had brought it back, and Jothik noticed the Vin commander's eyes focused on Chen's hand, and something like satisfaction crossed his alien features. "The vanishing units," Jati said quietly. But his voice carried in the silent chamber. "That is what they are called, are they not? We have intercepted the designation in encrypted human communications. We have found evidence of their existence in operation reports that were deleted, but not thoroughly enough. We have tracked their activities across a dozen conflicts, always operating in the shadows, always deniable, always invisible until they strike." Chen felt the diplomatic ground crumbling beneath his feet. Denial was becoming impossible. Deflection was failing. The council had done their research, compiled their evidence, and reached conclusions that were uncomfortably close to the truth. He made a decision then, one that would have consequences far beyond this chamber. He could continue to deny, continue to deflect, and watch as the council's suspicions hardened into certainty. Or he could acknowledge the truth in a way that gave humanity control of the narrative. "Every species," Chen said slowly, choosing his words with extreme care, "has the right to defend itself by whatever means necessary. The galaxy is not a safe place. We all know this. Some species have advanced technology. Others have superior numbers. Some have psychic abilities or natural weapons. Humanity has ingenuity, determination, and yes, the will to do what is necessary to protect our people. That is not an answer, Mort growled. It is the only answer I can give, Chen replied. You ask me to confirm the existence of forces that by their very nature cannot be confirmed. You ask me to make official what must remain unofficial. You ask me to expose methods and capabilities that, once exposed, lose their effectiveness. I cannot and will not do that. Dilvara leaned forward in her seat. Ambassador, this council has the right to know what threats exist in the galaxy. If humanity has developed military capabilities beyond what has been declared, that affects the security of every species. Here, we have treaties, agreements, protocols for military transparency. You cannot simply hide an entire branch of your military and expect the council to accept that. Chen met her gaze steadily. We hide nothing that we are required to disclose under galactic law. Our conventional forces are documented. Our fleet positions are reported. Our military expenditures are transparent. If there are other elements to human defense strategy, elements that operate outside conventional military structure, then they exist in the spaces that galactic law does not regulate. Convenient, Jick observed. You exploit a loophole in galactic law to operate forces that the Council cannot monitor or control. We exploit nothing, Chen said, his voice hardening slightly. We defend ourselves. The hegemony invaded our home world with the intent to break our civilization. They brought overwhelming force, superior technology, and the confidence of certain victory. And yet, here we stand victorious while they sue for peace. If the methods of that victory disturb you, perhaps you should question why the invasion was launched in the first place. The chamber erupted again, this time with more heated exchanges. Some delegates argued that human actions set a dangerous precedent, that allowing one species to operate unmonitored military forces would encourage others to do the same. Others pointed out that the Council had failed to prevent the hegemony invasion and had no moral authority to question human defensive measures. Mordith called for order, his voice cutting through the chaos. This debate can continue, but we must address the immediate concern. Ambassador Chen, the Council demands transparency. We demand information about these vanishing units. We demand to know their capabilities, their numbers, their command structure, and their operational parameters. Chen shook his head. The Council has no authority to demand that information. We have violated no galactic laws. We have attacked no neutral parties. We have defended ourselves against an unprovoked invasion. What methods we use to achieve that defense are not subject to Council oversight. Then we will make them subject to oversight, Mordith declared. I move that the Council draft new regulations requiring all member species to declare all military assets, including special operations forces, intelligence units, and any other personnel engaged in military or paramilitary activities. The motion was seconded immediately by 3 other delegates. Chen felt a sense of inevitability settling over the chamber. This was what he had feared. What Earth's military commanders had warned might happen. The vanishing units had been too effective, and their effectiveness had frightened the galaxy into action. But before the vote could be called, Delegate Soreth of the Creation stood. The Kryn were an old species, one of the founding members of the Council, and their words carried significant weight. I must speak against this motion, Soreth said, his ancient voice translated into a whisper that somehow filled the chamber. The honored delegates seemed to have forgotten recent history. When the crash threatened Cerealian colonies, did the Council intervene? When the hegemony began its aggressive expansion, did the Council act when dozens of species faced existential threats? Where was the Council's protective hand? He paused, letting his words sink in. The Council is magnificent at debate, at forming committees, at studying problems until those who suffer from those problems are dead. But action, protection, these we do not provide. And now when one species finds a way to protect itself effectively, we rush to regulate them. To expose their methods, to strip away their defenses because we are uncomfortable with their success. Morthith bristled. This is about transparency, about maintaining order. This is about fear, Sorith interrupted, his ancient authority overriding the Cerealians' protest. We fear what we cannot see. We fear what we cannot control. We fear that humanity has found a way to level the playing field against species with superior technology and numbers. But I ask you all, is that fear justification for stripping away a species' right to self-defense? The chamber fell into contemplative silence. Chen watched as delegates who had been ready to vote for new regulations now hesitated, reconsidering their positions. Shathik broke the silence. Elder Sorith raises valid points, but the question remains, if we allow humanity to operate forces in secret, what prevents other species from doing the same? What prevents an arms race conducted in shadows where no one knows who has what capabilities until war breaks out? What prevents it now? Chen asked quietly. Delegate Jik, do you truly believe that every species in this council has declared all their military capabilities? Do you believe there are no intelligence services operating in secret? No special forces conducting missions that will never be officially acknowledged? No weapons development programs hidden from Council oversight? The question hung in the air unanswered because everyone knew the answer. Every major species had secrets. Every military had units that operated outside public view. Humanity's only crime was being effective enough that their secrets could not be ignored. The difference, Morth said slowly, is that human secrets are winning wars. Human shadows are breaking military forces that should be unbeatable. Human ghosts are changing the balance of power in the galaxy. Chen nodded. Yes, they are. Because we had no choice. We are a young species in a galaxy full of civilizations thousands of years older than us. With technology we are only beginning to understand. With military forces that dwarf our own, we cannot match you in conventional warfare. We cannot compete with your numbers or your advancement. So, we found another way. We found a way to make our enemies afraid. To make them think twice before attacking us, to make the cost of invading Earth too high to be worth paying. He looked around the chamber, meeting eyes both familiar and alien. You ask about the vanishing units, I cannot confirm they exist. I cannot deny they exist. But I can tell you this, if they do exist, they exist because the galaxy forced us to create them. They exist because humanity learned that survival in this universe requires more than brave soldiers and advanced weapons. It requires the will to do what others will not. It requires the ability to strike fear into hearts that thought themselves fearless. It requires shadows to balance the light. The session continued for hours with debates and arguments and proposals that went nowhere. In the end, no regulations were passed. No demands were met. No secrets were exposed. The council adjourned with more questions than answers. More fear than understanding and the knowledge that humanity had changed the rules of galactic warfare in ways they could not fully comprehend. As Chen left the chamber, Jake approached him privately. You lied to us, Ambassador, the Vin said quietly. Your hand went to your collar when you denied having forces in that region. It is a tell, a sign of discomfort with untruth. Chen smiled tiredly. Perhaps, Commander. Or perhaps I was uncomfortable with being forced to discuss matters that should remain undiscussed. Either way, you will never know for certain. The vanishing units are real, Jake said. It was not a question. Chen looked at the alien commander. This career military officer who had spent his life understanding warfare and threats. Commander, I will tell you something off the record, something that will never appear in any official communication. The galaxy has always had shadows. It has always had secrets. It has always had forces that operated outside official channels. Humanity simply learned to use those shadows more effectively than most. Whether that disturbs you or not is irrelevant. What matters is that those who would threaten Earth now know that defeating our conventional forces is only the beginning. They know that shadows have teeth, and those teeth are sharp. Chen walked away, leaving Jake standing in the corridor, contemplating a galaxy that had become more complicated, more dangerous, and infinitely more frightening than he had ever imagined. The Council had investigated. They had found answers. But those answers had only revealed how much they did not know, and how powerless they were to change it. Earth's ghosts were real, and they were watching. The Antarctic ice stretched endlessly in all directions. A frozen wasteland where temperatures could kill an unprotected human in minutes. 3 kilometers beneath that ice, accessible only by a single heavily guarded elevator shaft, lay a facility that existed on no official maps and consumed power that was attributed to abandoned mining operations. General Sarakovich stood in the main briefing room, watching as soldiers filed in with the quiet efficiency of those who had learned that noise was an enemy. These were not ordinary soldiers. They wore no unit patches, no rank insignia, no identifying marks of any kind. Their uniforms were matte black, designed to absorb light and sensor sweeps. Their faces showed the marks of extensive training and harder experience. These were the vanishing units, Echko, Harlequin, Phantom, Wraith, and Poltergeist battalions. 573 operators, who, according to every official record, were dead. Kovich herself was a legend in military circles, though few knew the full extent of her career. She had been a special forces operator before moving into command, had seen action on 4 continents and 6 colony worlds, and had more classified combinations than most generals had total medals. She had also been the one to propose the Vanishing Units program 8 years ago when it became clear that conventional warfare alone would not be enough to protect humanity in a hostile galaxy. At ease, she said as the last operator entered the room. The soldiers relaxed marginally, but never completely. They could not afford to. Their training had made relaxation a luxury they no longer fully possessed. The Council knows, Kovich said without preamble. She believed in respecting her people enough to give them truth without sugar-coating. Not everything, not details. But they know you exist. They know what you do and they are afraid. A few operators exchanged glances. Most remained still, waiting for the implications to become clear. Ambassador Chen did well in the council session. Kovich continued. He neither confirmed nor denied your existence. He gave them no details, no operational information. Nothing they could use. But the galaxy has seen your work now. The hegemony invasion broke because of you. 17 installations neutralized in one coordinated strike. Hundreds of enemy soldiers eliminated without leaving evidence. Terror tactics that broke a military force designed to conquer Earth. She pulled up a holographic display showing a galactic map. Red markers indicated locations where the vanishing units had operated over the past 3 years. There were dozens of markers scattered across multiple star systems. You have become too effective, Kovach said. That sounds like praise, and in many ways it is. But effectiveness brings attention, and attention brings questions. Questions we cannot answer without compromising your operational security and more importantly, your lives. Captain Marcus Webb raised his hand slightly. Kovach nodded at him. Webb was Harlequin 7, one of the most skilled operators in the program. He had been officially dead for 3 years, killed in a training accident that had been carefully staged. His family had mourned him. His name was on a memorial wall. And yet he stood here. Alive, breathing, and responsible for operations that had saved thousands of human lives. General, what are the rules of engagement going forward? Webb asked. If the Council is watching, if they are trying to track our operations, how do we continue to function? It was a good question, the kind that showed why Webb had been selected for the program. The vanishing units relied on invisibility, on the enemy's inability to confirm their existence. Once that invisibility was compromised, their effectiveness could be severely reduced. The rules remain the same, Kovach said. You operate in shadows. You leave no evidence. You remain ghosts. The difference is that now everyone knows ghosts are real. They just cannot prove where or when you will appear. She changed the holographic display to show intelligence reports from various galactic species. 3 species have withdrawn planned military actions against human interests in the past month. Not because our conventional forces defeated them, but because they are afraid of encountering you. 2 more species have requested peace talks, offering favorable terms just to ensure they do not become your targets. The Kelter have ceased all intelligence gathering on human activities after the outpost incident. The outpost was necessary, said another operator, a woman with the designation Phantom 3. They were selling our communication protocols to the hegemony. They endangered human lives. I am not questioning the necessity, Kovach replied. I am pointing out the effectiveness. You left 53 bodies in a message. No evidence of how you entered or left. No survivors to describe what they saw. Just fear. And that fear has changed galactic politics more than a dozen conventional military victories could have achieved. She paused, looking at each operator in turn. These were volunteers, every one of them. They had chosen this life knowing what it would cost, knowing they would lose their identities, their families, their very existence in the official world. They had made that sacrifice because they believed in protecting humanity by any means necessary. But sacrifices had consequences. However, Kovach continued, her voice becoming harder. We need to discuss the psychological cost of your work, Dr. Ramirez. A woman in civilian clothes stepped forward from the side of the room. Dr. Elena Ramirez was the program's chief psychologist responsible for monitoring the mental health of operators who lived in conditions that would break most people. General operators, Dr. Ramirez said, her voice gentle but firm. I will be direct. The psychological assessments show increasing stress markers across all battalions. Depression indicators are up 40% from last year. Disassociation events have doubled. 3 operators have requested termination from the program and 17 more are showing signs of identity fragmentation. The room was silent. Identity Fragmentation was the clinical term for what happened when someone spent too long pretending to be dead, too long living without name or recognition, too long existing as a ghost. The mind began to fracture, unable to reconcile the person they had been with the shadow they had become. Webb spoke again. Doctor, we knew what we were signing up for. We knew the cost. Knowing and experiencing are different things, Captain Ramirez replied. You have been legally dead for 3 years. Your family. Better to have fewer operators who are psychologically stable than more who are fragmented and unstable. She looked at Dr. for Ramirez. How many are at critical risk? 17 show severe signs, Ramirez said quietly. Another 32 show moderate indicators. If we do not intervene, I estimate we will lose between 10 and 15 operators to break down within the next year. Some may become non-functional. Others may become security risks if their mental state deteriorates enough. The math was brutal but clear. Lose some operators to resurrection protocol or lose more to psychological collapse. I am opening the resurrection protocol to volunteers, Kovach announced. Anyone who feels they have reached their limit, who needs to step away from the shadows will be allowed to do so with full support and no judgment. This is not about weakness. This is about recognizing that every soldier has limits and there is no shame in reaching yours. She paused, then added, but I also need volunteers to stay. I need operators who can continue the mission. Who can maintain the fear that keeps humanity safe. The galaxy knows about you now. They are afraid. That fear is our weapon, and we need people strong enough to wield it. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Webb stood. I will stay, General, for as long as I am needed. Others stood as well, one by one. Echo 5, Phantom 3, Wraith 12, and dozens more. They stood not because they wanted to remain ghosts, not because they enjoyed living in shadows, but because they understood the necessity. But not everyone stood. Some operators remained seated, their faces showing relief mixed with guilt. They had reached their limit, and the resurrection protocol offered them a way out. Kovach nodded, accepting both groups without judgment. For those who stay, you have my gratitude and my commitment that we will support you in every way possible. For those who choose resurrection, you have served with honor and deserve the chance to reclaim your lives. Either choice is valid. Either choice is respected. Dr. Ramirez stepped forward again. For those seeking resurrection, please see me after this briefing. We will begin the process immediately. For those continuing, I will be implementing enhanced psychological support protocols, regular counseling sessions, peer support groups, and new techniques for managing identity stress. Kovach changed the display one final time, showing current threat assessments. For those staying, understand that your mission has not changed. You remain humanity's hidden blade. The fear that keeps our enemies cautious, the shadow that protects the light. The galaxy knows you exist now, but they do not know where you are, when you will strike, or how you operate. That uncertainty is your power. She highlighted several regions on the galactic map. Intelligence suggests 3 species are considering testing human defenses, trying to determine if the vanishing units are as effective as rumors suggest. They will be watching for you, trying to catch you, trying to prove you are not the unstoppable force the hegemony believes you to be. Let them watch, said Harlequin 7 quietly. Ghosts are best seen out of the corner of the eye, never straight on. Kovach smiled grimly. Exactly. You will continue operations as planned. Small teams, surgical strikes, maximum psychological impact with minimum evidence. Make them afraid of shadows. Make them second-guess every decision. Make them understand that attacking humanity means facing enemies they cannot see, cannot predict, and cannot defeat. She straightened to attention. And the operators did the same. You are the vanishing units. You are humanity's ghosts, our shadows, our hidden strength. The galaxy has learned to fear Earth's conventional army. Now they are learning about you. Make sure that fear is justified. Make sure they understand that humanity's shadows have teeth and those teeth are sharp. Dismissed. The operators filed out silently. Some heading to Dr. Ramirez to begin the resurrection process. Others returning to their quarters to prepare for missions that would never officially happen. Kovich watched them go, feeling the weight of command settling heavily on her shoulders. She had created this program, had recruited these soldiers. Had asked them to give up everything to become ghosts. Some had thrived in the shadows. Others had been consumed by them. And now, with the galaxy watching, she had to balance operational necessity against human cost. The vanishing units had saved humanity. They had broken the hegemony invasion, prevented countless conflicts, and established Earth as a power that could not be safely attacked. They had achieved everything Kovich had hoped for when she designed the program. But victory had a price, and that price was paid by people who existed only as shadows. Fighting a war the galaxy barely acknowledged, sacrificing everything for a humanity that would never know their names. Kovich looked at the holographic display, at the map showing human territory and the countless threats surrounding it. The vanishing units would continue their work. Some operators would leave seeking to reclaim their humanity. Others would stay, accepting their role as eternal ghosts. Either way, Earth's shadows would remain, watching, waiting, ready to defend humanity by means that conventional warfare could never achieve. The galaxy had learned about the vanishing units. Now they would learn what it meant to fight enemies who had already given up everything, including their own existence, for the cause they believed in. The Galactic Council chambers had seen many strange moments in its 1,000-year history. But what happened 6 weeks after the hegemony sued for peace would be remembered as one of the strangest. The hegemony delegation representing a military power that had conquered 17 species and dominated 3 sectors of space formally surrendered to a species they had invaded with confident superiority. But it was not the surrender itself that shocked the assembled delegates. It was the reason given. The hegemony ambassador, a proud warrior whose scales bore the scars of a dozen conflicts, spoke with a tremor in his voice that no translator could hide. We cannot continue this war. Not because we lack the military capability. Not because of casualties, though they were severe. But because our soldiers refuse to fight, they are broken, not in body, but in mind. They fear shadows. They fear silence. They fear the enemy they cannot see. The ambassador paused, his 3 eyes showing emotions that were rare for his species. Genuine terror. We have lost entire battalions to an enemy. That leaves no trace. We have found our soldiers dead with no wounds, no evidence, no explanation. Our command posts fall silent and are discovered as massacre sites with no indication of who attacked or how. Our troops report being watched from darkness, hunted by things that should not exist. We cannot fight ghosts. We cannot defeat nightmares. We surrender because the alternative is the complete psychological destruction of our military forces. Ambassador Cheney watched from his seat as the surrender was formalized. He felt no triumph, only a deep exhaustion. The vanishing units had achieved their purpose, had broken an invasion force through fear and psychological warfare. But victory felt hollow when achieved through methods that disturbed even those who employed them. After the formal session ended, Chen found himself surrounded by delegates who no longer bothered with diplomatic pretense. Delegate Mordith of the Cerulean Concord approached first, his massive frame somehow less intimidating than his words. The Concord wishes to discuss acquiring the services of your vanishing units, Ambassador. We have territorial disputes that could be resolved with such capabilities. Name your price. Chen felt his blood turn to ice. They are not for sale, delegate. They are not mercenaries. Then what are they? Demanded Thilver of the Kelcheron Collective. If they are not mercenaries, if they are not regular military, what exactly are these shadows of yours? And, more importantly, who controls them? Other delegates crowded closer, each with their own demands or offers. The Vin wanted training in similar tactics. The Kelter offered vast sums for just one consultation with vanishing unit operators. The Zarkon Dominion threatened sanctions unless humanity shared its ghost soldier technology. Chen raised his hands for silence, his diplomatic training barely sufficient to maintain composure. The vanishing units are not a commodity to be traded or a service to be purchased. They exist solely for the defense of humanity and human interests. They are not available for hire, rent or consultation, but they are real, Jik said quietly from the edge of the crowd. You can no longer deny it, Ambassador. The hegemony surrender makes that clear. You have created something unprecedented, and the galaxy has a right to understand what it is. Chen looked across the sea of alien faces, seeing fear, greed, calculation, and curiosity in various combinations. The secret was out, not through official confirmation, but through undeniable results. The galaxy knew humanity had shadow soldiers, ghost warriors who struck from nowhere and vanished without trace. I will say this once, Chen announced, his voice carrying through the crowd. The vanishing units exist because humanity learned a hard lesson. In our own history, we learned that sometimes the only way to prevent greater bloodshed is to become the thing that makes others choose peace over war. They are our reminder that we will do whatever is necessary to protect our own. And what happens when your nightmares decide they no longer wish to remain hidden? Morthith asked. What happens when your shadows want to step into the light? When your ghost soldiers decide they want recognition, want glory, want the things that normal soldiers receive, the question struck deeper than the Cerulean knew. Chen had asked the same thing of General Kovich in their encrypted communication just days before. The answer still haunted him. That, Chen said carefully, is a matter of human internal policy and not subject to council inquiry. But the question lingered in his mind as he left the chambers. What happened when ghosts wanted to be human again? What happened when soldiers who had given up everything, including their own identities, wanted to reclaim what they had sacrificed? The answer came faster than anyone expected. 3 days after the council session, Chen received an urgent encrypted call from General Kovich. Her face on the screen showed stress lines that had not been there before. We have a problem, Kovich said without preamble. Some of the operators are asking to come home. Not through resurrection protocol, not with new identities, but as themselves. They want to stop being ghosts. Chen felt a headache forming behind his eyes. That is impossible. They are legally dead. Their families have mourned them. Records have been erased. They cannot simply come back. I know that. Kovich snapped, her composure cracking slightly. But knowing and accepting are different things. These people have sacrificed everything, Chen. They gave up their lives, their identities, their very existence to protect humanity. And now they are asking for the one thing we cannot give them, their lives back. Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking through the implications. How many? 17 want immediate termination. In return, 32 more are showing signs of severe psychological stress. Dr. Ramirez believes we will lose at least 10 operators to complete breakdown within months if we do not do something. The resurrection protocol is not enough for everyone, Kovach interrupted. Some operators do not want new lives. They want their old lives. They want to go home to their families, to their friends, to the people who think they are dead. They want to stop living in shadows. Chen rubbed his temples. And if we let them, if we somehow bring them back, explain it as mistakes in death. Notifications, as missions so classified that even their deaths were covers. The questions that would raise, the investigations that would follow would expose the entire program. Kovach finished. I know, but Chin, these are people, human beings who have done terrible things for good reasons, who have become monsters to protect those they love, who have given up everything and are now realizing the price was too high. Can we afford to let them go? Chen asked, hating himself for framing it in those terms, but knowing the question needed to be asked. Operationally, I mean, can the program survive losing that many people? Kovach was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with resignation. Can we afford not to? They are still human, Chen. We ask them to become ghosts to save humanity. But ghosts eventually want to be human again. If we refuse, if we trap them in this existence forever, we are not protecting humanity. We are destroying the very people we asked to protect it. The call ended with no resolution, leaving Chen to stare at the blank screen and contemplate an impossible situation. The vanishing units had achieved everything they were designed to do. They had broken the hegemony, prevented conflicts, established humanity as a power too dangerous to attack casually. They had saved countless lives through fear and shadow. But the shadows were cast by real people. People who had sacrificed their existence, their identities, their futures. And now those people wanted something in return, something that might be impossible to give. Chen called for a meeting with the Joint Chiefs, with intelligence directors, with the civilian leadership that technically knew about the vanishing units, but preferred not to think about them. The conversation that followed was painful, filled with hard truths and harder decisions. We cannot let them return, argued Admiral Petrov, the head of naval operations. The security risk is too great. If even one operator talks, if even one ghost reveals the truth, the entire program collapses. And without the program, without the fear it generates, we lose our greatest strategic advantage. But we also cannot keep them as prisoners, countered Director Walsh of Intelligence. They volunteered, yes, but that volunteering came with the assumption they could leave when their service was complete. Another conflict prevented, another threat neutralized. All while remaining ghosts, shadows, nightmares that existed in the space between official reality and actual truth. Kovach closed the display and walked through the empty corridors of the facility. She passed quarters where operators slept fitfully, always ready to deploy, always carrying the weight of what they had become. She passed training rooms where new recruits learned to move without sound, to kill without evidence, to become the shadows that humanity needed. She reached her office and sat down, pulling up a file that she kept encrypted, even from most classified systems. It was a list of names. Every operator who had ever served in the vanishing units, living, dead, returned, broken, and still serving. 573 names when the program started. 412 still in service. 93. Through Resurrection Protocol, living new lives under new identities. 41 returned to their old lives, trying to be people they no longer were. 27 dead in operations that had never officially occurred. Each name represented a person who had chosen to become a ghost. Each represented a sacrifice that most humans would never know about, never understand, never appreciate. Kovich had created this program, believing it was necessary. 8 years later, she still believed that the vanishing units had saved humanity from invasions, from conflicts that would have cost millions of lives, from enemies that conventional forces could not defeat. But she also knew the cost. Not just in lives lost or identities erased, but in souls consumed by the shadows they inhabited. In people who could never fully return to the light. Even when given the chance, in families who got their loved ones back, only to discover that the person who returned was not quite the person they had lost. A message appeared on her screen. Ambassador Chen marked urgent. She opened it and read, Council, vote tomorrow on mandatory military transparency regulations. They are going to force all species to declare special operations units. We will have to choose. Expose the vanishing units or defy the Council and face sanctions. Kovich stared at the message, feeling the weight of 8 years of impossible decisions pressing down on her. The Council wanted answers. The galaxy wanted proof. Everyone wanted to drag humanity's shadows into the light, to examine them, to understand them, to regulate them. But shadows could not exist in light. The moment the vanishing units were officially acknowledged, they would lose their power. Fear required uncertainty. Terror required the unknown. Once the enemy knew exactly what they faced, knew the numbers and capabilities and limitations, the psychological advantage would vanish. She typed a response. We cannot expose them. The program only works because it exists in doubt. The moment we confirm details, we lose everything we have built. Chen's reply came quickly. Then we defy the Council, face sanctions. Possible trade restrictions, diplomatic isolation. The cost could be severe. Kovich thought about the operators still in the field, still fighting in shadows, still being the nightmares that kept humanity safe. She thought about those who had returned, carrying scars that would never heal. She thought about the future threats that would come, the enemies that would test Earth's defenses, the conflicts that would require soldiers willing to become ghosts. The cost is already severe, she typed. We pay it in the souls of our operators, in the families who mourn people who are not dead. In the psychological destruction of people who gave up everything. If we expose them now, if we drag them into the light, their sacrifice becomes meaningless. We face the Council sanctions. We protect the shadows. Chen's response was a single word. Agreed. The next day, in the Galactic Council chambers, Ambassador Chen Wei stood before the assembled delegates and spoke words that would change humanity's relationship with the galaxy. The Council has demanded transparency regarding special operations forces. The Council wants humanity to expose its methods, its capabilities, its secrets. The Council wants to regulate what it fears. Chen paused, looking across the sea of alien faces. The answer is no. The chamber erupted in protests, demands, threats. Morditha's voice rose above the others. You cannot simply refuse, Ambassador. The Council has the authority. The Council has the authority granted to it. By its members, Chen interrupted. And humanity as a sovereign species retains the right to defend itself by whatever means necessary. We will not expose our defensive capabilities to satisfy the curiosity or calm the fears of those who would threaten us. This will have consequences, Jake warned. Trade, sanctions, diplomatic isolation. The Council will not accept such defiance, Chen nodded. Then we accept those consequences. Humanity has faced worse and survived. We will continue to operate within the bounds of galactic law regarding conventional warfare. But our special operations capabilities, our defensive strategies, our methods, these will remain our own. Not because we wish to hide them out of shame, but because their effectiveness requires their secrecy. He looked directly at the gathered delegates. You ask about the vanishing units. You want to know their numbers, their capabilities, their limitations. I will tell you this and nothing more. They exist to protect humanity. They exist because the galaxy has proven time and again that peaceful species must be prepared to do terrible things to survive. They exist because we refuse to be victims. And if we impose sanctions, Bilvara asked, then we endure sanctions, Chen replied. Humanity has endured worse. We have survived extinction events on our home world. We have survived wars that nearly destroyed us. We have survived first contact with a galaxy that saw us as inferior. We will survive your disapproval as well. The vote was called. Sanctions were approved by a narrow margin. Trade restrictions were implemented. Diplomatic channels were limited. Humanity was isolated, punished for refusing to expose the shadows that protected them. But the vanishing units remained secret. The ghost remained. Ghost and humanity, though isolated, remained safe. 3 months after the council vote, Marcus Webb received another encrypted message. It was not from General Kovach this time. It was from Phantom 3, one of the operators still in service. We heard about the council vote, about the sanctions, about what standing by us cost humanity. The message paused and Webb could almost feel the weight behind the next words. Is it worth it? Are we worth it? Webb sat in his backyard again under stars that suddenly seemed very far away. He thought about his time as Harley Quinn. 7. About the missions he had run, the lives he had taken, the fear he had SWN. He thought about the psychological cost, the identity loss, the impossible burden of being a ghost. But he also thought about the lives saved. The conflicts prevented, the invasion stopped before they began. The countless humans who slept safely because nightmares stood guard in the darkness. He typed slowly, carefully, trying to put into words what he had learned from being a shadow and returning to the light. You ask if you are worth the cost. I cannot answer that. What I can tell you is this. You have saved more lives than you have taken. You have prevented more suffering than you have caused. You are the price humanity pays for security in a hostile galaxy. Whether that price is worth paying, that is for history to judge. But know this. Every person who sleeps safely tonight, who lives without fear of invasion, who raises children in peace, they exist because you chose to become shadows. That has to count for something. He sent the message and sat in the darkness, a returned ghost trying to be human again. Thinking about the operators still out there fighting the war that most humans did not know existed. The galaxy had learned about the vanishing units. They had learned to fear them, tried to expose them, attempted to regulate them. And when humanity refused to bend, when Earth chose isolation over exposure, the galaxy learned something else. They Learned that humanity would sacrifice anything to protect its own. That humans would endorse sanctions, face isolation. Accept any cost to keep their shadows hidden and effective. That Earth's ghosts were not just military assets, but sacred trusts. People who had given up everything and deserved protection in return. The price of shadows was high. It was paid in lost identities and psychological scars, in families separated by lies necessary for survival. It was paid in the souls of operators who could never fully return to the light, who carried darkness with them forever. But it was a price humanity chose to pay. Because in a hostile galaxy where strength determined survival, Earth had found strength in shadows, in ghosts who fought unseen, in nightmares that protected the innocent. And that strength, purchased at terrible cost, kept humanity free. General Kovach stood in her office beneath Antarctic ice, looking at the list of names one more time. Each name a story, each story a sacrifice, each sacrifice a thread in the tapestry of humanity's survival. She added a note to the file, one that would remain classified long after she was gone. Long after the current operators had served their time, long after the vanishing units evolved into whatever they would become. We asked them to become ghosts. She wrote. We asked them to give up everything to protect everyone. Some paid the price and endured. Others paid the price and broke. All of them deserve to be remembered, even if that memory must remain hidden. They are humanities. Shadows, our necessary monsters, our silent guardians, and the galaxy fears them because they represent our absolute commitment to survival. Whatever the cost, whatever the sacrifice, whatever we must become, we endure. She encrypted the file and stood, walking back through the facility, where shadows prepared for their next mission. Where ghosts trained to be better nightmares. Where people who had given up their existence continued to fight for those who would never know their names. The vanishing units would continue. New operators would volunteer, accepting the same impossible bargain their predecessors had accepted. The galaxy would continue to fear Earth's shadows, never quite understanding them, never quite able to counter them, and humanity would endure. Protected by ghosts who had chosen to vanish so that others could live in the light. That was the price of shadows. And humanity, for better or worse, had chosen to pay.